Now, for a long time, I've been saying that you should be looking at what Obama is doing, and by his actions, you would know that he was a Christian or a Muslim. And his actions so far, as being President of the United States, are far weighed in the side for the Muslims. Let me give you an example. This is from the Jews News. It came out November the 3rd of 2015 with the headline, Investigation Finds Obama Financing Mosques Worldwide with U.S. Taxpayer Dollars. It's from Washington, D.C. A Channel 2 Action News investigation found that the State Department is sending millions of dollars to save mosques overseas. This investment has received criticism as the United States makes an effort to slash nearly $4 trillion in government spending. Plenty of outrage following the announcement made Thursday afternoon by the government commission that suggested huge cuts to the budget, including eliminating the interest education for home mortgage. This juxtaposed with the United States investing millions to refurbish mosques as a goodwill effort in Muslim countries has upset many taxpayer groups. We are spending money we don't have. This is all on a gigantic credit card right now, said Jared Thomas, a taxpayer advocate. Millions of dollars have been spent in places like Cyprus. The State Department displays before and after pictures of mosques refurbished with U.S. tax dollars. I think it's very hard to explain to the American taxpayer right now, who's having an extraordinary time paying bills and making ends meet, that this is why we took this out of our paycheck, so we can fund this, said Thomas. The State Department declined a Channel 2 Action News request for an interview. We wanted to ask why we are using tax dollars to refurbish religious buildings overseas. The State Department did send Channel 2 Action News an email saying that they are fighting Islamic extremism by building relationships with Islamic leaders. Egyptian American human rights activist Nani Darwish told Channel 2 Action News anchor Justin Farmer that trying to buy respect in the Middle East only shows our weakness. It goes on to say, we are rebuilding mosques to support the radicals, not to support the moderates. We are building mosques to issue fatwas to death against people like me, said Darwish. Your tax dollars also fund computers and mosques in places like Tajikistan and Mali, at an ancient mud brick mosque in Mali, the State Department. So there's a long list of things that President Barack Hussein Obama is doing. Not only is he supporting the rebuilding of religious mosques for radical Muslims, but he's also supporting the troops, ISIS troops, that have been fighting against Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And while we see this leftist support for people trying to destroy America, we also see that he does nothing to protect the Christians who are being brutally killed by the Muslims, groups like Al-Qaeda and specifically ISIS. And let it also be known that he is not spending any money at all for all the Christian churches that were demolished by ISIS troops after they went in and brutally killed the Christians. So while he's going way out of his way for the Muslims, he is doing, again, nothing to help the Christians. And as for me, specifically, I find it very hard that if the man calls himself a Christian, that he is doing so much for one group and nothing for the group that he is supposed to be associated with, the Christians. And so at this point in the Middle East, there's been close to 250,000 Christians slaughtered, killed for their faith. And Barack Obama has done nothing to help the plight of the Christians. Watch this section that has to do with Christian persecution and Obama doing nothing.
There is another area close by where there's an absence of American forces, a few volunteers in a so-called Christian militia, and that is to deal with the persecution of the Christians. You're a believer. You make no bones, no secret there. As a believer, when you see what is happening Christians, Yazidis, others, even Muslims who theologically don't line up with ISIS. Why and how is the world and the United States standing back from it?
JD, you know this, and what I'm about to say, others know it, but they just won't say it. ISIS is practicing a genocide in a part of the world where the very first Christian churches were planted by Paul. I mean, if you look at the Nineveh plain, all those churches are now gone. They've been leveled, they've been blown down, they've been knocked down with bulldozers. Entire Christian communities, hundreds of people in little communities, have been murdered in the most atrocious ways you can imagine. I mean, I've seen it. I have seen the footage taken by ISIS cameramen who have better cameras than you've got here or that I've got at Fox. And they're out there documenting this for their legacy of destruction of anything other than what they believe Sharia law ought to be. The genocide that's being worked today has already killed over 250,000 people. It's caused the exodus of more than 1 million. You're looking at 14 million people displaced overall throughout all the territories that ISIS has been engaged in. And for us not to call it that, for the United Nations not to do anything about it, for us to fail in everything, to include the refugee efforts. I'm going to show you footage from, in a week, you'll see footage from the refugee camps and the despicable despair that these people are in. And the Kurds, the only ones protecting them, are getting nothing in terms of help from the United States. That's unconscionable.
Why is President Obama turning a deaf ear and a blind eye to the plight of Christians?
JD, if I knew the answers to what's going on in this man's heart and head, I could probably deal with it a little better, but I don't. I do know the consequences of what he's done. The consequences of his failure to stand up in moral outrage about what ISIS has done, the calamity that's been for the Christian communities and the Yazidis and others, the disaster for, an entire generation of people are being murdered off, and not to call it what it is, that they could not have been ignorant of the footage that I've seen and you've seen that we wouldn't dare put on the air because it's so horrific. And yet this administration, for reasons that they'll have to answer for perhaps decades from now, for failing to stand up to this genocide, they're going to be held morally responsible for what's happened out there.